Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cabinet meeting of Rushcliffe Borough Council. I'd just like to remind everybody that the Cabinet meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from the meeting, but the use of any such images is not in the control of the council. So I'll move on to the first item, which is apologies for absence. I think we're all here, so no apologies. Item 2, declarations of interest. I wish to make a declaration both for myself and also on behalf of Councillor Brennan on item 6 on the agenda. I am a director of the Freeport, and Councillor Brennan is the nominated substitute alternative. However, it is non-pecuniary. We do not receive any payments, and therefore it is purely non-pecuniary, and so we will be taking part and voting on that item. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting on the 14th of April. Can I have your approval to sign those, please? All in favour? Thank you. Item 4, citizens' questions. I don't believe we have any citizens' questions, so we move straight on to item 5. We have 2 questions from opposition group leaders. If I could invite Councillor Walker, please, to come forward and ask your question. Obviously, you're very familiar with the drill.
Thank you. Good evening. There's little clarity on the ownership model proposed for the site beyond Uniper's landowner, and the primary benefit to local residents appears to be a diminishing promise of jobs. At this strategic stage, what concrete steps has Cabinet and its partners taken to ensure that the wealth generated by the increased data centres on the site is retained within the local economy rather than extracted elsewhere?
Thank you. Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Councillor Walker, for the question. Regarding the future ownership model for this site you refer to, this, I'm afraid, is something that this council has no control over. Your concern about a diminishing promise of jobs is, in my opinion, flawed. There should be no reduction in the anticipated number of jobs on this site. Data centres use is already permitted within the existing LDO. Indeed, your Labour government has called for data centre sites known as AI growth zones, and your Labour controlled MCA has put in a bid to the government for these. Your question about wealth generated from the data centres being retained within the local economy is laudable. Development on the site, including data centres, will generate significant business rates that will be retained for reinvestment in the local area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary related to your original question?
Have you considered alternative business models that prioritise community wealth building, local democratic ownership, and long-term social value, rather than primarily extractive or externally owned businesses? And if so, what models have you explored?
Councillor Upton.
I think I understand the number of your supplementary to be all about the wealth generated in the future on this site, the whole site holistically, and your concern about having some of that wealth, that money, passported, if you like, to the local Rushcliffe and local environments. I think I answered it in my first response to your question, that the main wealth generated there, which we can have a stake in, is through the business rates, and that will be cascaded across the local area and the local residents. Any other profit or loss is nothing that this council can control at all.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Walker. The second question is from Councillor Thomas. I believe she is not able to attend this evening, therefore I will ask the question on her behalf for Councillor Upton to respond to again. So the question is, the licence for water extraction is from the Trent, not the Soar, and the Soar is considerably closer to the southern site than the Trent. It is not clear to us, i.e. Councillor Thomas, from the documentation how the water will get across the A453 to the data centre, or how it will get back to the Trent for discharge. Residents are concerned the soil must be protected from temperature increases. Will there be conditions on approval of certificates of compliance to require that heat generated by cooling data centres on the power station site will be harvested and reused? Councillor Upson.
Thank you for that somewhat technical and watery question. On behalf of Councillor Thomas, I agree that the current licence for water extraction is from the River Trent and not the River Soar, and I have no proposals to change that arrangement. The former power station used a significant amount of river water to provide cooling from the River Trent, but the expectation of water abstraction from the Trent for any future site usages is considered to be significantly lower than was previously used, if any at all. The Local Development Order Amendment report, which I will be presenting later this evening, does not change the parameters or the requirements in the LDO, and no change is made to water abstraction and usage. The question makes specific reference to data centres. There is a wide range of options available for cooling data centres, but at present we are not in a position to say if data centres, whether on the north or the south parts of the site, would require river water for cooling, and if so, how much. This would be part of a data centre design and would form part of the certificate of compliance process. Any water abstraction would need an environmental licence. So to answer the question about cooling water crossing the A453 or under it, quite frankly, it's too early to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Upton. That completes the questions, so I'll move straight on now to item 6, which relates to the East Midlands Freeport change of accountable body. As I indicated in the declarations of interest, I'm a director of the Freeport, but in a non-pecuniary status. So the recommendations contained in this report are threefold, and it is basically referring to the transfer of the accountable body, which is at the moment with Leicestershire County Council, to transfer that to the East Midlands Combined County Authority, which I refer to as EMCA. If I could just refer colleagues to paragraph 4.4 on page 4, and really the first sentence tells us most of what we need to know, where it states that MHCLG has stated that the accountable body status should transfer from the Leicestershire County Council to EMCA no later than 2 years after EMCA's creation. So we are at that point. It does seem sensible to me, and the geography of the Freeport area is not wholly within the EMCA geography, but really that doesn't matter because it is an administrative status and it relates to being an accountable body. So it has been discussed already in other forums. So the recommendations are here before us, A, B and C, in order that that transfer of accountable body status can take place. So I'll move those 3 recommendations, A, B and C, on page 3. Seconder, please, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Well, as you say, it's essentially mandatory, so this is really an administrative and tidying up exercise, but it does go some way to simplifying the structures that we've got on this site or on the sites, and any simplification makes it easier for investors to navigate sort of local public private sector infrastructure here, enabling and encouraging investment in our patch or in the MCA patch. So I think it's a good idea on its own merits, regardless of the fact that it's been in any event made mandatory. I think I also note from the papers that there are proposals, for example, for 6 monthly reviews between MCA, the Freeport and the local authority and other public sector partners about strategic alignment between MCA and the Freeport and wider regional priorities. So it's hoped that this kind of change is going to make things knit together a little better and be less fragmented than there's a risk of doing when there's a number of different stakeholders involved. So as you say, it's basically something that needs to happen. Other organisations have approved it, and I'm happy to second the 3 recommendations at paragraph 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? No. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 7 on page 19 is the Rushcliffe-on-Soar local development order that has been before us before, but this is an amendment to it. So I'll turn to Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, this has been before us before, but for the sake of the worldwide audience, I'll give a fairly brief synopsis, I think. Bear with me. This report is another milestone in the ambition to redevelop the former Rushcliffe-on-Soar power station site. Cabinet are aware of the history of this site, its decommissioning, and the vision that Uniper, the site owner, and this council have for its future use. It was to try and enable its future use and streamline the planning process that we adopted a local development order in July 2023. This specified the types of uses which will be permitted on the site and effectively grants outline planning consent for them. The LDO was also approved with the aim of accelerating development and to give greater certainty to investors. But importantly, the existence of the LDO does not prevent developers from submitting planning applications should they wish to attempt to secure consent for development proposals that do not comply with the LDO. The LDO must be reviewed this summer, and this will take some months to complete, but the local planning authority can legally review, modify or revoke an adopted LDO at any time to respond to issues that arise. The LDO already identifies data centres as an appropriate use on the northern part of the site. Excuse me. And this report is principally concerned with allowing them to be built on the southern part. Since approval of the LDO, market conditions have changed, as has the political situation, and there is now a major national initiative to bring forward data centre development quickly to help drive economic growth in the UK. Additionally, in September 2024, government categorised data centres as critical national infrastructure, placing them in the same category as energy and water infrastructure. The use of the northern part of the site is severely restricted for several years, possibly to around 2031, due to the approval of a large open cast gypsum quarry and the demolition of the redundant power station infrastructure. We've had a request from the site's owner, Uniper, to consider making a limited number of amendments to the LDO, namely 1, to allow data centres to be located on the southern part of the site, south of the A453. Secondly, to allow environmental mitigation works to come forward early with council agreement. And thirdly, to allow local labour agreements to be agreed on a plot by plot basis. Also, the East Midlands Combined County Authority, MCA, has submitted a bid to government for this site for an artificial intelligence growth zone. Now, Cabinet deferred the report that I brought to it on the 14th of April to further consider concerns raised regarding future comprehensive redevelopment of the whole site. And since then, positive discussions have taken place with Uniper, who have confirmed that, one, substantial progress has been made on decommissioning to enable the safe demolition of the power station to begin, positive actions to resolve other constraints and to accelerate the holistic redevelopment of the whole site. And secondly, that contractual negotiations for the demolition project are progressing positively with the necessary consents and internal approvals now in place, and that they are working at pace to successfully conclude contract negotiations and address the outstanding planning conditions to allow this work to proceed. This should bring reassurance that the whole of the site, both north and south of the A453, is being progressed for redevelopment. This rather long and detailed report of 75 pages and 6 large appendices considers and comments on the responses from the public consultation and the latest schedule of proposed amendments to the LDO given at Appendix 1. As I say, it's a rather long report, and given the time restraint this evening, I'll try and give a summary of the key issues around the 3 proposed amendments. Firstly, to allow data centre uses to be located on the southern part of the site, south of the A453. The report gives some very detailed responses to the main issues raised by the consultation, such as data centres on the southern part of the site and the very special circumstances for development in the Greenbelt, the height and the style of data centres, the net zero energy issue and power demand, traffic impacts and access to the strategic transport network, water demands, heat emissions for data centres, capping the number of data centres, environmental impacts, potential impacts on East Midlands Airport, for instance. Data centre development could potentially comprise a series of relatively low-rise buildings, which should be able to be effectively screened with landscaping. With power availability, good access and the proximity of a skilled workforce, the Rushcliffe site is considered an attractive option for data centre development. Overall, it is considered that the main issues raised by consultees have been addressed at paragraphs 4.9 to 4.31 of the report, and none are considered sufficient to justify refusal on the proposed amendment to allow data centres to be located on the southern part of the site. Secondly, the request to allow environmental mitigation works to come forward early with the Council's agreement. The proposed amendment does not change the biodiversity BNG target for the site, but it provides greater discretion to the Council to allow environmental mitigation proposals to come forward earlier and potentially in advance of development. In all cases, the decision on whether to accept the environmental mitigation proposals rests with the Council and not with the developers. Thirdly, to allow local labour agreements to be agreed on a plot-by-plot basis. The final requested amendment to the LDO concerns local labour agreements. The LDO requires applicants to submit a local labour agreement to demonstrate that the development offers employment opportunities for local people during the construction phase. We strongly support the use of local labour wherever reasonably practicable. However, the wording is considered ambiguous and can be interpreted as requiring a single local labour agreement to be submitted and approved prior to the commencement of the first development, and thereafter to be adhered to by all plot developers. Development is likely to come forward in a number of phases or on a plot-by-plot basis with different contractors. And so to remove any ambiguity, it is proposed that the wording is adjusted to make clear that individual local labour agreements are to be submitted for each individual plot prior to commencement. The Local Development Framework Group. Reference is made in the report in paragraphs 4.66 to 4.70 concerning comments made by the Council's Local Development Framework Group at its meeting on the 16th of March this year, principally around the decision-making process for this report. The LDF is an advisory group of 15 cross-party councillors, and having reviewed the Constitution and indeed sought a legal opinion, the decision to amend the LDO is confirmed as an executive cabinet decision. Finally, there are financial implications if this amendment to the LDO is not approved, and these are set out in paragraph 7.1.3. They include potential reduced business rates, deferred Section 106 contributions to support infrastructure, and adverse impacts on the delivery of the overall Freeport business plan. It's therefore recommended to Cabinet, and I refer to Section 2 recommendations, and I'll read them if you like, Chairman. It is recommended that Cabinet A notes the consultation representations received on the proposed amendments to the Rushcliffe Local Development Order. B, approves the proposed amendments to the Rushcliffe Local Development Order in accordance with Schedule 4A bracket 3 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended. And finally, C, delegates authority to the Director, Development and Economic Growth or Assistant Director of Planning to incorporate the approved amendments into the Rushcliffe Local Development Order and publish the amended LDO. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Seconder, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, that's a very comprehensive introduction by Councillor Upton as always, so I won't repeat any of that, don't be alarmed. But I think just wanted to touch on two areas really. First of all, this is a really important development opportunity that we need to take for Rushcliffe. Not only is it a huge site that can deliver huge economic growth and jobs for the area, but also leaving that derelict could be a stain potential on Rushcliffe going forward. That being said, it is right, and as Councillor Upton mentioned as well, that we need to take the community with us, and we need to make sure that we have all the safeguards in place that we are looking to as part of the LDO process. And I'm sure UNIPA will work with us and the local residents to make sure that the development and any impact is mitigated in terms of the local residents, but also that their concerns are taken into account, and also to bring them with us, because like I say, it has the opportunity really exciting for the residents who live nearby there as well. So happy to second, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That has been quite a comprehensive presentation. Any questions or comments? Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, I mean, I thank you, Councillor Upton, for that very comprehensive, articulating very comprehensively the technicalities around the amendment. But I think very briefly from myself, I mean, it's clearly an important and pragmatic amendment, and it responds to the changing national economic priorities which you've outlined. I think particularly around obviously AI, digital infrastructure and energy intensive investment opportunities. But importantly, it does, of course, allow us as a council and the region to respond at pace whilst maintaining the planning controls and governance mechanisms around which have already been built into the LDO. So I think that's an important point. And finally, from my own portfolio, Chairman, I think the key point here is that it unlocks that delivery on the site much sooner, and it supports that inward investment which you've highlighted, and strengthen that wider, I think, Freeport proposition, and potentially from my own portfolio perspective generates very significant long-term business rates for the borough. So I think it's a very pragmatic amendment, and I fully support it.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Well, I won't add to everything that's been said, which I fully endorse. I'm just really pleased to hear that the demolition process is moving ahead quickly. Well, I'm not actually, because I'm very sorry to see the cooling towers go, as I've made very clear. But given the inevitability that that's going to happen, I'm pleased that UNIPA have demonstrated their commitment to clearing the site and getting it ready for investment by moving that ahead quickly. So that I'm very pleased to hear that. And as Councillor Verdi said, this is extremely important investment site, both for the borough and for the county and for the wider region, and possibly nationally too, in terms of the scale and potential for the site. So the sooner we can get it going and the sooner we can start attracting that innovative and a high-tech investment into that site, the better. So I'm very pleased to hear that, as I say, they're moving ahead quickly to get the demolition going and get the site ready for investment. So
Thank you. Yes, absolutely agree with those comments, providing the flexibility of options, and if this can bring earlier investment and development, then that's only to be welcomed. So very much hope this site can be brought forward as soon as possible. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you. That's the